The brain, these chemicals in the brain are values neutral. It's very much like hunger, all right? When you're hungry, you're either going to eat the brownie or the fruit.
Brownie.
But it's values neutral. And it's the same thing with the brain. You're either going to go into a healthy context of acting out sexually or an unhealthy context of acting out sexually. But the impurity impacts the brain so much that, as in Ephesians 4 says, and I think it's Ephesians 4, he took my iPad, but
Ephesians... But I noticed he didn't take Matt's because Matt would sue him for theft. And I can't let that go by because my wife is a crackberry. She is on it every 30 seconds. So it's my fault. See how that works? Go ahead, Josh, I'm sorry.
The point of Ephesians 4, it says, giving themselves over to every impurity, having lost sensitivity for a continual lust for more. And it literally happens in the brain. Paul was a neurosurgeon. He understood that when you give yourself over to impurities, you lose sensitivity. You lose sensitivity to relationships. You lose sensitivity to relationship with others and with God. And if we could just expose the scientific research, all right, in the secular world, we could do this without even bringing the Bible into context, so they can't beat us up over the biblical authority. God created the brain. If you believe that that we're created in the image of God, the brain research does not in any way contradict what the Bible says. And it's impacting our teenagers, their ability to be able to connect and stay connected in long-term intimate attachment relationships. And this is why I believe that the epidemic of divorce, unless couples just continue to cohabitate and they don't marry, that we're going to see increased divorce, increased brokenness in marriages amongst the younger generation because of the impact on the brain and the stickiness factor, if you will, or the inability to stick to one person that they should connect with because what happens in the brain. And I can go into a little bit of that more tomorrow, but not to bore you. It's amazing the way that God created the brain and how everything that Donna and Eric and Matt are talking about, how the impact, if these academics and these researchers at Johns Hopkins would look at the brain chemistry and how the dopamine and literally the dopamine overtakes the oxytocin in the brain and it just inhibits the ability to connect in long-term attachment relationships, we could see the effects of sexualization on our children and our teenagers in America.
I think Donna wants to add a thought or two to that.
Sorry, I get a little passionate.
No, I absolutely
we couldn't tell,
agree
Josh.
with everything. This is a great discussion. I hope it's all getting filmed. But yeah, this inability to bond is prevalent, so prevalent. And one of the reasons is probably the primary reason is that God created our sexuality is one of the greatest gifts, if not the greatest gift he's given us. And, you know, as I was really thinking and praying about this and all that we're dealing with as far as the attack on sexuality, and again, remembering who's the enemy, okay, it's not necessarily the pedophiles or the pornographers, it's Satan himself and his legion of fallen angels, all right? So, and they have always attacked our sexuality. You go all the way back, you know, to the Old Testament, and you see when there was ungodliness and ungodly kings and everything, they would begin, you know, the Baal worship and the Ashtoreth worship and all of this and all the orgy and on all of this that would come up, and it was always part of that culture that had fallen away from God, and that's why God always said, tear down those idols. When a godly king would come into power, right? And porneia is just sexual immorality. That's what it means, you know, in the Bible. It's sexual immorality, so it's everything that we're dealing with. It's fornication, it's adultery, it's homosexuality, everything surrounding abortion. that all falls under that. And Paul spends a lot of time in the first chapter of Romans talking about the decline of someone who begins to fall away, and then he gives them over. And when he starts to say that how he gives them over, it's all in that area of sexual brokenness, right? So as I was thinking about that and meditating on that, I'm like, what is this really all about? Well, if God gave us our sexuality, we're created in his image, right? We're all created in his image. And the sexual act was meant to be that incredible blessing shared between a man and a woman in marriage that would do what? Bring two into what? One, right? So obviously the enemy is going to distort that in any way he possibly can. But who is he really after? In the end, his attack is on God. Isn't that right? That's who he hates. He hates God. He hates his children. Well, if we're made in the image of God, and sexuality really is in the physical realm symbolic of that unity of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, that oneness. And that oneness then that comes, from man and woman being joined together, and that ultimate act of, they're psychologically, emotionally, physically, and sexually coming together into one. So I haven't articulated this before, so I hope I'm making sense. So when he's attacking our sexuality, he's actually distorting what God has created. And the attack is on God, because we're made in his image. And anytime you see this distortion of sexuality, it's using human beings in that distortion. So so I think if we can understand some of the underlying dynamics, I probably didn't explain that very well. Maybe some of my colleagues can help make sense.
Well, I know
of what
Josh
I'm trying to share.
Josh has a comment he'd like to make.
Yeah. So that is the foundation.
That was your
of where
cue to
all this
pass
is
him the
coming
mic.
from. So here you go.
No, I'm just going to expound on what
I
she
told
just
you I
said.
couldn't control his group.
I'm just going to expound on what she just said, and I need my iPad. That's why Eric took it, and I couldn't finish
Crutch.
it. No, but I didn't finish answering the question. He asked me what I do with parents and with counselors and what I tell them. I help them see what's going on in the brain. And even with teenagers, I sit down and explain it in a way they understand so they can see what it's doing to their brain. It's kind of like the old, this is your brain on drugs commercials. Very similar, okay? And it's the same kind of stuff. But when you think about sexuality, we humans, what we're trying to do is we're trying to reduce sex down to an animal act. That's exactly what we're trying to do. We're trying to reduce it down to make it look like we're nothing more than mammals. And there's songs that do this, all right? When I do talks, I am a little bit more lively and sing some of them. But
We're not believing that.
but I want you to
We
think
should
about
just be a little bit more passionate.
just think about this for a second. Human beings are vastly over-equipped for sex. Female species, the human species, we're one of the only where females actually orgasm, where the breasts don't drop before pregnancy, where women are in heat more than once or twice a year. I mean, if you're a hunter, it's time to go deer hunting when they're in heat, right? And
It's entirely more information than I needed.
but I want to make my point here. The reason is because of the power of relationships and the power of attraction in the context of human sexuality. God created us differently than he did animals. We are the only species that commonly copulates face to face, so that partners actually look at each other as they mate and they have full body contact. And we're also the only species that actually wants to do it in privacy. We're not out in the public just some people are, but those who want to reduce it to mammal sex. But you see how God
I've
created
totally
us
lost
differently.
control.
I just want to read one comment from
Oh no.
from Philip Yancey that hopefully would get this. He said, "I might feel more attraction toward a reductionistic approach to sex if I saw that it addressed these deeper needs. if I sensed that the sexual revolution, as Matt was talking about, had increased respect between the genders, had created a more loving environment for children, relieved the ache of personal loneliness, and actually fostered intimacy. I have seen no such evidence. So,
All right, Deborah Maffett, where are you? I think we are ready for a question or two from the audience out here. I see a lady over here with her hand up. It's a secret question.
Thank you. I have a niece who's attending Dartmouth, and in the summer, this summer she's taking a class at University of Pittsburgh. And, you know, I'm saying that because she's learning some things at Dartmouth. She is a Christian, okay? She's learning some things at Dartmouth, but she took a class on marriage. This is kind of like a little switch into relationships. And I said to her, well, you know, I've been out of school for so long, maybe you can share some of what you're learning in your marriage class with me, you know. So she says, oh, well, we don't really talk about marriage, you know, in the class like marriage is. We talk about alternatives to marriage. And that's what they're talking about in their class at the University of Pittsburgh. I'm sure it's all over the country and in high schools. And I guess my concern and question is, even when, you know, kids have the opportunity to learn what is right, but when they're in school, especially in school environments, and they're learning that what is wrong is right, because my niece, who's a Christian, was okay with learning about the alternative behaviors, the alternative lifestyle, and she just thought it was no big deal because her professor told her that not many people are marrying anymore because there's no need to be married.
You can keep that.